10 audition killers. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke. I was at a party last night, so my voice is deeper from trying to talk over all the music. And now on to our topic. 10 audition killers and how to avoid them. Okay, first of all, let me address the fact that the title of this video is a little clickbaity, I admit. But indeed, some of these topics that I'm going to cover can actually kill your chances of booking an audition. Some of them are more about habits that you might have developed that over time, as you make multiple impressions on a casting office, it could tell them things about you that might prevent you from booking. So with that in mind, let's go over the 10 things that we see at Get Taped on a regular basis that we would consider audition killers. These first two are sort of bookends. They are opposites on the same spectrum. This first one I will call loose physicality. Now, this is when an actor is just not aware of their own body. Sometimes to the extent that they don't even know that they're supposed to stand on the mark that we have placed on the floor at Get Taped. There's even a boom mic directly above that mark. So you would think that an actor who presumably should be self-aware would know that that's where they have to stand because that's where the microphone is, that's where the tape is, that's where the lights seem to be pointed. And yet some actors just are preoccupied maybe with the audition itself or otherwise just aren't aware of their own physicality. And so it doesn't just manifest as missing their mark, but it continues to manifest throughout the audition itself in the form of physicality that is unfocused energy. They're moving around the frame. They're shifting from hip to hip throughout the audition. And if I frame them perfectly at the beginning of the audition, and then I hit record, and then I look down at my script to start reading, and now I'm in the scene with them, and then I glance over at the monitor partway through the scene, and I realize that they are now no longer centered, and they're way off to the side, and their shoulder is off camera. It's no good. And if an actor can't control their physicality like that, it starts to become a liability in that audition and in future auditions if it's a habit. So take a look at some of your past auditions to see how much do you move in your audition and does it make sense for the character and for the scene? If so, well then you're fine. But if it looks like it's a habit that seems to be happening across all auditions, all characters, and all scenes, well then you might have a habit that needs to be corrected. Now, number two is on the flip side of that spectrum, and that is stiffness. And for this one, I'll keep it short. There is a difference between stillness and stiffness. The next time you're standing in line at a coffee shop or anywhere else where you can people watch, take a look at people who are largely on their phones, because that's what everyone's doing nowadays, and notice their physicality. Most people stand pretty still while they're waiting in line, looking at their phone, or even as they're searching the menu for what they're going to order. Or let's say they're in line with someone else, listening to their friends speak to them. People are still when they're listening, when they're processing, but they're not stiff. And that's a big difference. Actors who've been told that they have too much physicality can oftentimes switch to the other end of the spectrum. Sometimes even theater actors, when transitioning to TV and film, have been told by a coach or a teacher that you need to contain it, you need to do less, you need to be still. And the actor takes it too far and gets stiff, where literally there's tension in their body from head to toe, and it looks like they're frozen in place, like they're frozen in carbonite like Han Solo. So don't be stiff. Be still. Okay, this next topic is wasting the opening moment of your audition. Casting directors nowadays are exclusively looking at self-tapes for the first round of auditions. And if they're looking at 40 tapes per role, and if it's a project that has a lot of roles and a short timeline, they're watching a lot of tape. And quite honestly, they're not going to have a lot of time to watch every second of your audition if they're under the gun to submit their top selections to producers yesterday. So with that in mind, your opening 10 seconds are crucial to the success of your audition. And This will play into some of the other tips later, but you can't waste that opening moment. You can't be caught looking at your reader waiting for the scene to start. You need to be in the scene before they ever hit record. So please do not waste that opening moment. And if you need more on this topic, we have done a video on it before, so check the show notes below. Now, this next one is a big topic, and it's a big problem with actors that we see, which is a lack of script analysis. Perhaps the actor just has never learned it, or they've forgotten it. Maybe they've just gotten a little too complacent with their routine of how they prep auditions. But in short, there is just a overall lack of understanding of what the scene is calling for. And if I can figure that out within 15 seconds of cold reading your script, then you as the actor should have already figured this out in your prep. Because I do admit, running a taping service, reading thousands of scenes every year, you get really good at cold reading and being able to analyze a script on the spot. So yes, I may have an unfair advantage, and also I may have seen other scenes from the same project, so I've started to put together a better picture of what is happening in your scene, or what the purpose of your scene is, or your character, in which case I will pass along that wisdom. But at a more basic level, actors, you need to be able to do simple script analysis when you are auditioning. So if you're auditioning for season 2 or 3 or 10 of a show, there's no excuse. You need to know the show, the tone of it, the pacing of it, the network, the style of comedy, if it's a comedy, how dark it is, if it's a drama, etc. And even if it's season 1, or even if it's the pilot of a show, or if it's a movie where you don't have previous material to look at, you need to get good at interpreting the tone through the stage directions, through the information, through the dialogue, through those parentheticals that are just below the character name that give you a hint at what the writer, what the producers are thinking in terms of how this scene is supposed to unfold. If you're not watching television and film, like a lot of it over the course of your career, then you need to start. I mean, don't you think a surgeon has watched a lot of surgeries before they are ever given a scalpel? Don't you think a lawyer spends countless hours studying previous cases so that when it comes time for them to argue a case, they have the knowledge? If this is your profession, if this is your chosen vocation, if this is your life's work, then why aren't you spending a portion of that, a decent portion of that, studying television and film? And I do mean study. Sure, you can watch television and film to relax and to disconnect, but you should always have that actor on your shoulder, that director on your shoulder, watching it simultaneously with a different eye, trying to figure out the choices that were made to create what you're seeing on the screen. The choices the actor made, the choices the director made, the choices the editor made. If you start shifting your focus while watching television and film to be more critical like that, then you'll start to get a better idea when looking at a script as to what that writer intended, as to what that director or those producers are intending. Oh, and if you can find a good class on script analysis, that will help a lot. Okay, this next one, which goes right along with the script analysis tip, is bad cold reading skills. Many actors are afraid to use their script in their audition, and I understand it. They've listened to Q&As with casting directors, they've read the taping instructions, they've heard from their agent, or they're just aware that, well, if the other 49 actors auditioning for this aren't using their script, well, then I shouldn't use my script either. So I get it. But I also think that there's just a lack of training when it comes to good cold reading skills. Because many of the actors who do choose to use their script do so poorly. I mean, I've seen many actors hold their script and then never use it, even as they're searching for that line, and the script is literally in their hand. Many actors have never been taught the triangle technique, which is while you are thinking that you're going to have to look down at your script, don't just do the down and up, because that's very obvious that you went down for the line. But in the course of doing that paragraph of dialogue, you look down and then you look off to the side, and then you come back to whoever it is you're talking to. You create a triangle with your eyes in one direction or the other, and it makes that glance down to the script look more casual, look more intentional, look more like human behavior and less like an actor searching for their next line. But for that to look natural, you can't wait until the moment that you need that line. You have to plan ahead. You have to know where those points are in the script that you're gonna have to look down so that it doesn't become a gut reaction in the moment to, oh crap, what's my line? And once again, a class where you get to practice these cold reading skills is essential for every actor. And the last bit is many actors who are holding their script are completely unaware of how much noise paper makes. So just be aware that if you have your script in your hand, don't staple it because that creates a lot of noise as you're flipping the pages. Instead, take the staple out and gently switch pages when you're going from page 1 to page 2. Try not to make the script noise become the star of your scene. Okay, this next audition killer I'm going to call putting a hat on a hat. I've talked about it before. You can check out the show notes below for a previous video on this topic. But essentially it can happen maybe in a couple ways, but here's the primary way. You're looking at the scene or maybe even the breakdown, which we'll talk about in a second. And you get really excited about this because you actually know what that archetype is for the character. You've maybe played this type of character before. So you get so excited to show casting how well you can do this. And the emphasis is on the word show. And that's not a good thing. If you're trying to show me that you can play cop number 3 and you start doubling down on all of those behaviors that you know cops have, and maybe in this particular scene, they're the intimidating cop. So you really start layering on the intimidation and your voice gets even deeper than mine is today. And you like to squint your eyes and it just gets ridiculous because you're trying to accentuate, you're trying to exaggerate things that are already inside you, things that you don't even need to exaggerate at all. In fact, you need to just do less. You need to relax into the character instead of trying to put on the character and show me the character. It becomes too much. And that becomes a very quick audition killer. And this goes hand in hand with the next audition killer, which is trying to be the breakdown. Pro tip, that character breakdown that you're reading, that you're obsessing over, likely is either old information or is completely irrelevant as to why you were called in for the role. I've gone over this before on this channel, but for reasons that we don't really need to know, just take my word for it because I've heard this directly from many casting directors. That character breakdown was made at the beginning of the casting process. And as that process unfolds, information changes, the preferences of the producers change. And so your character may no longer be 60s female, which has actually happened to me. I got an audition that was for 60s female. And at the time I was barely 40 and clearly a male. And I actually did sort of furrow my eyebrows thinking, is this a mistake? And when I reached out to my agent, they said, it's not a mistake. Casting has opened it up, has changed the specs to be now male and a little bit younger. So that information is always changing. So you should not hold yourself accountable to every word in that breakdown. And that was just me talking about the age, sex, ethnicity of the role. How about those adjectives that describe the character? Well, if they fit you, great. Well, then you don't need to worry about it because that's already you. If they are so out in left field, so the opposite of who you are, well, then you might be the wild card. Or again, the information might have changed. They may no longer want the character to be that weak, nerdy type. And so now they want them to be more of a strong, confident type. And so that's why you are being called in for this role. And so the trap, the audition killer, is if you're thinking that this is some sort of gospel truth that I have to be the adjectives in this breakdown. Now you're crafting a role that is, first of all, a performance. And not only that, it's an inaccurate performance of what is going to book you the role. It is not you, and it is not even what they want. And it becomes a wasted audition because you obsessed over trying to be the breakdown. Okay, this next audition killer is excessive blinking, which I have covered before in our video, 6 Habits We See in Self-Tapes. Again, check the show notes below. I can't even really do this organically in a way that represents what we see on self-tapes sometimes. But there are a few reasons why you might be excessively blinking in your self-tape. One, it's a dry room. Okay. Well, if you know you get dry eyes like that, then you need to always carry eye drops with you, period. Another reason, dehydration. Well, please don't drink the night before an audition. That's just common sense. Certainly don't drink and I'm talking about alcohol, the night before you're on set, the night before you're doing headshots. It's just bad news no matter what. And if you're a coffee drinker or if you're drinking other liquids that tend to dehydrate you, then you need to stay hydrated. This is your career. There's just no excuse for not being prepared, both mentally and physically. And the third reason you might be excessively blinking is nervousness or a lack of preparation. And in all three of these cases, there are remedies for it. Sometimes it's just a glass of water or some eye drops. Sometimes you need a class. You need practice. You need reps to be able to get over those nerves, to be able to learn how to prepare in a shorter amount of time so that you can be more confident, so that your blinking doesn't betray the fact that you don't know your next line. Okay, our penultimate topic on what could kill your audition is eyelines. This was also covered in that video on 6 habits we see in self-tapes. Now, this isn't necessarily an audition killer unless you do some really weird stuff. But again, as you make multiple impressions on the same casting office over time, if they're seeing an issue in regards to these technical things on your self-tapes, it just doesn't give them a lot of confidence to put you on set where there's 100 people all staring at you, expecting you to perform at your highest. But in short, here are the things in regards to eyelines that can kill your audition. First of all, it's just not engaging with the reader, having sort of a wandering eyeline where you're never really focused or engaged with that reader. It can also get weird if you have an imaginary visual. Maybe there's a second character on the other side of the camera and they just keep moving. They keep changing places, and we sense that you're just not confident in where they are. We see your eyes wander as you look for that other person. And it's not so much that your eyes are wandering and then that is what is killing the audition. But if you clearly aren't connected to that character as you react to them, then that does start to affect your audition. In which case, just play all of the characters to the reader if you're not confident in playing to an imaginary visual. And the last thing that could affect your audition, depending on the casting office, is if you accidentally spike the camera. Now, this is a YouTube video where the entire point is for me to look into the camera lens. But when you're talking to a character in your audition and you accidentally spike the camera, it's kind of weird. Don't do it. And if the camera is distracting to you, then again, you need reps. And I don't mean representation, I mean repetitions in auditions. You should not be auditioning for legitimate projects where there's money at stake if this is still a habit of yours. You need to stop auditioning for real for a hot second and work on these simple technical skills. Because if you get on set for a medium to full budget project and you still have a problem spiking the camera lens, now you're wasting potentially thousands of dollars every minute that you have to do another take because you're nervous, because now you have this giant camera that is up in your grill and you don't know how to not look at it. Okay, now this last topic for audition killers is more of a long-term pervasive habit that you might be forming with or without your own knowledge. And I'll just call it hating your own work. Really, it's the mindset that you have between auditions or reflecting on your auditions or as you're stepping into that space about to record your audition. Now, this is the silent killer because it's really you self-sabotaging. For instance, at Get Taped, when an actor is reviewing their first take or their first couple takes and the take is over, I turn to them and I say, "So what'd you think?" And so often the first thing out of their mouth is, or I didn't hate it. What? I didn't hate it. Gosh, I hope you didn't hate it. That's you on the screen. If you hated your take, that is a very unhealthy inner monologue that is going through your brain. That is just not the way you should be walking through your career or your life. And if this is your tendency to look at your takes with disdain, then perhaps you need a timeout when it comes to watching playback. You're destroying your ability to be creative if you're recording a take, watching it back with hate in your mind, and then recording another take to fix what was wrong, and then immediately watching it back, still hating it, and then taping another take. That cycle is never going to get you booked. And God forbid it does get you booked, because then it's just going to reinforce this behavior of doing a take, watching it back with hate in your brain, doing another take, watching it back with stank face, doing another take until you're finally like, okay, I guess that's serviceable. Because one of the things you're doing by watching the tapes back with this negativity, with this eye for what's wrong, is you're so focused on the commerce of this interaction. In other words, you're worried about the booking, the money, the business side of it. Maybe because your audition numbers are low, or maybe because you are hoping to make insurance and you have forgotten about the art. There will be time to think about your booking ratios and all that stuff. But when you are in that sacred space of the self tape, you can't be thinking about the product, the outcome. You can only be thinking about the process if you want to be successful. And here's another way this negativity shows up. After you've submitted, you might tell yourself, oh gosh, well, that's the best I could do with that amount of time. I had to phone it in because the deadline was so tight and I had work or I had other auditions that I had to prioritize. And what you're doing is you're trying to protect your ego when you inevitably find out that someone else booked the role. So that way you can blame someone. Well, if casting had given me more time. Well, if casting had given me more information. I imagine if you're honest with yourself, you have been in this downward spiral before. I know I have. This is a constant battle, even for me. I'm not someone who's pretending to have a perfect mindset when it comes to this industry, specifically self-tapes. But you just have to be so careful because it is a downward spiral. Because as you tell yourself this negative story and then you don't book, and that confirms your suspicions about whatever, and that just makes you more negative, and then you book less, and then you're more negative, and so forth and so on. And then finally you do book, and that is your reaction. Finally. And you actually are angry somehow at the booking because whatever, it didn't come sooner. And so that I don't end on a down note, let me give you one big tip that will help your auditions, especially in regards to that 10th audition killer, that mindset thing. And that is to have fun. If you can even trick yourself into enjoying the process of the self-tape and not watching it back unless you are going to celebrate that process, then you might actually find yourself having a little bit of fun and at least some peace about it, maybe contentment, maybe even joy. And trust me, if you can move away from that negativity and start to find fun in the process, again, putting product and outcome aside, deal with that at some future date. Do not let it come into that sacred space of the audition room. If you can do that, if you can start to actually find joy and fun in the process, even for those deeply dramatic roles, it will bleed through the camera lens to that viewer. Trust me. Okay, there's so much more to discuss on all of these topics, but for now, drop a comment below if you have additional thoughts. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set.